Welcome, everyone. My name is Nicole Gotzeleg, and I'm the Senior Communications Manager here at Hello Circle. And before we jump in, I want to quickly introduce Hello Circle for those of you who are new to our community. So, who are we? What are we? We're a leadership development platform created by the Berlin Innovation Agency, and we are dedicated to helping people teams, HR leaders, L&D leaders, and really any leaders in high growth organizations grow and make a real impact. You may know us from the Berlin Innovation Agency. We have a track record of supporting more than 100 high growth companies like Airbnb, LinkedIn, and HelloFresh. We really believe that innovation starts with investing in people. So at Hello Circle, our mission is to empower leaders to navigate complexity, make meaningful decisions, and foster continuous growth within teams. We're so excited to have you all today. This is our first official webinar from Hello Circle. And we are here with Patricia Dall'Astra. She is a People and Organizational Development Lead at Zenjob. And are your current L&D strategies truly empowering your leaders to navigate fast-paced, ever-changing environments? If that's a question that you have in mind, and while you're all here today, you are in the right place, because Patricia is here to explore strategies that high-performing teams can use to drive growth in your organization. So whether you're a people ops professional, L&D, senior manager, HR leader, it's going to be a conversation that's going to be about how to create learning environments that truly upskill managers to build resilient customer culture. Okay, so I think I've talked enough there, and you've heard my my monologue. So let me introduce our guest, Patricia Dall'Astra. Patricia has been with Zenjob for the past 3 years, and she brings a wealth of experience in her senior roles in L&D at companies like Uberall, where I know Patricia from, and Booking.com. She's one of the most passionate leaders that I know when it comes to upskilling and training and creating workplaces where inclusion, diversity, and a sense of belonging thrive. She's also participated in Hello's High Performance Manager program, and here she deepened her skills in leadership development and gained valuable insights that have shaped her approach to supporting teams. Woo, Patricia, welcome. You got to sit through that 5-minute spiel. How you doing?
Thank you. Hi, it's such a pleasure to be here.
Well, we love to have you here. And I want to know, what are you currently doing at Zenjob? And
yeah. So as I said, I've been with Zenjob for a little over 3 years now, and my role, it's a long name, but essentially it consists of enabling the organization and the people within it to grow, to develop healthily, and to have the skills and the knowledge that they need to make sure that the company can achieve their goals. So that means I deal with topics around performance management, feedback culture, engagement, of course, training, learning, culture, and all this juicy things.
So how did you actually get into this role? Did you just sort of graduate from university and you were like, I just want to work in learning and development?
I wish, but I also didn't wish. So unlike a few people that I know that had their paths very clear early on in their lives, I had a bumpy one. But I think that also is what makes me so passionate about many different things. And I believe quite a few of you might resonate with that, which was I wanted to be a teacher when I was a child, but I was not very encouraged to continue that path. I come from Brazil, so education is not a very wealthy, let's say, profession there. And I actually went to university to study psychology. I studied 2 years out of 5. That's the length of our bachelor. And I had to pause that degree for health issues. And when I came back, I decided to change my area. And I actually graduated in interior design, which is very surprising for some people. And then I did a master's in accessibility, which is still within the area of architecture and design, but it focuses on planning spaces to include as many people as possible, right? Because I've always been passionate about including people with disabilities and any other outliers, let's say. But I've always, even when I was studying psychology, I never wanted to do clinic psychology. I was to either go on the direction of educational psychology or social psychology. And throughout my studies, I was working as a teacher. So when I moved to Berlin, which was 10 years ago, I actually started working in Booking.com here in Berlin in their customer service department. And the moment I could change my role into trainer, to really help the new joiners to be onboarded and to be really skilled for their roles, I jumped right in. And since then, after Booking, I joined Uberall, as you mentioned, and that's when I joined actually HR, so the people team. So I went into the field of learning and development on a broader scale, let's say. So I'm very, very passionate about helping others figure out how they can learn and develop further. And I find it really beautiful when people have a story like similar to me, which is you don't need to follow a specific path, but even if you don't know what you want to do and you do something completely different, I'm pretty sure that all your different experiences will make sense at some point, and you are always learning and you're always gaining from that.
I love that. And you mentioned too, I mean, we don't want to digress here, but you mentioned too a health issue that changed the trajectory for you as well. And sometimes it's those little wake up calls and we go, aha, this is what I'm supposed to be really doing right now. So did you find that was a bit of a like, okay, now I can maybe do what it is I'm really supposed to do? Did it help you in that way a little bit? I'm more curious.
Yeah, it didn't help me in the sense that I was still a bit unsure of what exactly I was supposed to do. But it was a moment of my life that I think I have two siblings. I'm the youngest of three. So I think until that point, I was just kind of following the path that was expected of me, right? You finish high school, you go to university, and that's how your life goes. And I think that moment when I really was forced to pause, that's the moment when I realized actually, it's not that I still wanted to study, but I realized I can make choices that are not just what others expect of me. Yeah. So that definitely played a role.
That's a great takeaway, I think, for the audience as well. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
So you've been at Zenjob 3 years. You're in Uberall, high growth, Zenjob, high growth, Booking.com, just big tech company. Did you find that there was one like common challenge that most of your leaders or new leaders were facing when they were trying to even just upskill their teams or upskill themselves, really?
Yeah, I think that one very common situation that I find is especially when companies are really in their growth phase where they're expanding their teams. So they have really excellent people who are in individual contributor roles. And then somebody needs to lead the team eventually. So they become leaders for the first time, perhaps not because they chose or not because they wanted, or perhaps because that was what they thought that development meant, right? That was the only way to be successful, which is not true. But then they didn't really have the full skill set to do that. And sometimes, in growth organizations, we might not have all the time and even resources and budget to provide proper training to prepare people to be fully skilled by the time when they have to take that role, right? So usually what happens is that people just jump in and they have to go, and eventually they might get some sort of training, but a lot is learned on the job. So it's this switching from an individual contributor role and also mindset to actually understanding that, your role now is to actually help the individuals in your team to do most of the job that you were doing before. So kind of like a balancing the understanding, like how do you develop them? How do you help them skill and also get things done in the quality or in the way that maybe it's not what you would do. So yeah, kind of finding this balance is sometimes tricky.
Yeah. And that's a really big one because I've worked in high growth companies before, like Hotjar and Uberall as well. And sometimes I would see team leads going into managing a whole team with no experience managing people before, but great project managers and great at getting stuff done. And it's like, okay, you're ready to do this, but now how do you do it? And what do you, I can see this is why we need L&D teams so much. And one of those skills that a lot of times isn't learned just on the job, and something we do need training for, is psychological safety. And that's really crucial in building a resilient culture. A lot of us feel like we know what it is, but maybe it's a bit abstract. So what is it really? So how can we create these environments where people actually feel safe to openly share and their ideas and concerns?
Yeah. It's very interesting because this topic is also very close to my heart, and it was part of a very big initiative that we have had here at Zenjob this year, which is tied to a bigger initiative on feedback, improving our feedback culture. Because indeed, psychological safety actually, even though it sounds abstract, it sounds fluffy, it's actually so complex, and it's really the foundation of everything that you need to get it right. So we had a lot of workshops, also focus groups, a survey, etc. But essentially, psychological safety is really not about being nice. It's not about holding back on something that you think might be unpleasant to somebody else. In fact, it's quite the opposite, right? It is about candor. It's not an environment that will be free of conflict. When you are in a psychologically safe environment, there will be conflict, but the difference is that, while people have different points of view, they will seek to understand each other's views better, and they will come out with a better solution. So they will make sure to deal with the conflicts in a more healthy way. And this is why, a high level of psychological safety is the foundation of a healthy feedback culture. And it's really, it contains so many other subtopics, but essentially it is built at the behavioral level. So there's really no magic wand. I wish I could just say, if you do one thing, then everything else changes. But actually, in order to cultivate psychological safety across a team and across a whole organization, each of us, one thing is, yes, the leader does play the biggest role here. I think we can all agree by now, by so many researches that we've had, that the managers have such a big influence on how the team dynamics work. But each of us, whether you are an individual contributor or not, we all need to review and adjust behaviors that happen in our everyday interactions. So we have to embrace concrete daily practices that will model and also reward, especially like vulnerability and having an open communication culture where you can demonstrate that you are up for people to making mistakes so that you can learn from that.
That's really interesting, because being able to make mistakes without fear of being like maybe reprimanded or shamed or, you know, publicly shown something, I think is a really big thing, because as humans, we're all going to make mistakes, and it's definitely going to happen. Can you give us an example of how we can create psychological safety, maybe around something like mistakes? Like maybe
Mm-hmm.
you send an email out and maybe you CC the wrong person, for example.
Yeah. That depends also, of course, the context, right? I think context is
Of
key.
course.
It depends what you shared with the person, but sometimes it's just about, apologizing and say, hey, I made a mistake,
Yeah.
apologize, course correct, and move on, right? And sometimes that might feel a bit more scary, like scarier than it should be. So I think that, first of all, leaders should always model vulnerability and this openness for mistakes, for learning for mistakes, and perhaps establishing some sort of like norms or agreement, or referring to the company values, if that's kind of something that you can link back, to always encourage people to, through respectful communication, ensure that they can point out when they made a mistake, and if anybody else has any comment that sounds blaming or finger pointing, that this is actually that the leader or that somebody else can feel like, hey, this is not okay, because we encourage people to make mistakes because we're learning from them, right? So it's about, I think that the small things about, maybe you share some agreements in advance, especially let's say if you have a meeting where you are discussing, we're doing a brainstorming with different stakeholders. So perhaps before starting this kind of workshop, agree on, like, no idea is silly, and no question is stupid, and we will learn from mistakes, so that people feel there's a ground that we understand, there's a common ground, and whatever happens that is against these agreements can be brought up by anyone.
Yeah, that's really impactful because I remember at Uberall, the HR team and the people team, this was really ingrained in our values. Like it was always about assuming good intent as well. Like
Yeah.
if, say, you maybe read something on Slack and you read it as something very maybe accusatory or maybe really too direct or something, I remember the people would be like, always assume good intent, right?
Yeah,
Tracy
absolutely.
sends me something, I'm not going to just assume that she's mad at me or something like that. I'm just going to assume that we are in a good flow and a good resonance. And if she does have something that is concerning her, she will let me know, or I can ask you, that sort of thing too. But that's
Yeah,
also psychological safety. So I need to feel safe enough to.
absolutely.
You need to feel safe enough with me. So yeah, and it really is important to come from leadership. So even programs like what we do at Hello, we do touch on this, and we do
Hmm.
um, share with our trainees or people we are upskilling, how to do that, because not all of us know. And like you say, it's not just about being nice to everybody, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. We could talk about this for a whole webinar as
Yes.
well. When it comes to things like feedback and performance, I mean, feedback is key to any kind of development, and performance
Hmm.
cycles are challenging for everybody. Most of us, if you've worked in any kind of a high growth company, don't like them. They take a long time. When you're actually implementing them as a people leader, they are excruciating because nobody wants to do them. You're always following up and you have to sift through everything, and it's so overwhelming. So how do you make sure that they are effective and people are actually doing them so that growth can come out of that? So how do you do this at Zenjob?
One is indeed the feedback culture, and the other part is how do we manage performance, and they're really deeply linked. I think that in order for a company to have a performance management that indeed not everybody will love, I guess nobody will love, but they will understand that it's important. It's a process, right? And you need to kind of educate people on why we do this, how we're doing this, what is in it for them, so that people kind of start slowly getting the buy-in. And this took a while, right? So we implemented a formal performance process cycle in, I think, beginning of 2021. So it was actually right before I joined. I joined when the second cycle at all, like ever, was being launched. And since then, quite a few things have changed. So I think that again, it's linked with the whole feedback culture, right? And in order for you to have a performance process that actually gives results that are actionable and that help people do something about it, that is not just about deciding who goes in, who stays or who doesn't. You need to have a culture that really has feedback as something that is part of the routine of everybody. It makes it a lot easier so that things don't pile up at the moment when people have to write their own self-reflection or their reviews, but rather if they spread this feedback across an entire, like throughout the months that are being evaluated, that makes it a lot better. And also you get timely feedback, right? So people can act upon those and maybe even get better by the time that they are being fully evaluated. And leaders should also be able to manage, like to really figure out what are the person's strengths and what they have to improve. So to balance also the level of, like, let's say, positive and constructive feedback, to kind of like ensure that this is slowly normalized, and encourage an open dialogue about them. Sorry, I felt like you wanted to jump in maybe.
There's so much I want to say about feedback because it's so important, but it's so terrifying for a lot of people because a lot of us don't want to feel judged or
Mhm.
ridiculed, and other people are like, bring it on as hard and as heavy as you can, and other people are more sensitive to feedback. And nobody wants
Mhm.
to go into a performance review, 3 months down the road and hear feedback that was from 3 months prior and it wasn't addressed then, but it's coming back later and later. So how do you actually keep that more in the day to day? So you're not like surprised with like, oh, John thinks I'm, not meeting expectations. Why didn't you tell me this 3 months ago, right? Like if it's peer feedback for one.
Yeah. 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 I wish I could tell you the solution to this. Unfortunately, I don't have the full solution. I mean, I don't think any company has cracked this, and I guess it's kind of it's half relieving, half panicking because that means that there's still a lot of work to do. But we have gone a long way already. So one thing is to some things that may help, right? So one is really on the leader side. So to really model like, hey, I expect you to ask for feedback. So this is actually, we have a component in our competency framework. So the competencies that are expected by every individual to perform. And one of them is what we call active growth. So it's a lot to do on growth mindset and really taking ownership in their development, which includes seeking for feedback proactively, also like constantly, continuously, right? So this is one thing that you can do, like you can embed it in your organization structure on the performance management frameworks so that people know that this is expected of them. And also have maybe a proper tool, or even if you're a very small organization, you don't have the budget to have a tool where people can request or exchange feedback. For example, if you use Slack, you could use some bots or some also add-ons that probably help you remind people to request feedback on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, or have some channels where people kind of shout out. So this is already some small actions that you can take. Also, what we use, what I really like, and I feel like this year we managed to gain traction is in our tool. Besides the whole performance and 360 feedback, we also have what we call instant feedback. So that is really like anyone can request and can give feedback to anyone or from anyone at any time. And that's fantastic. So it can either be just a praise, but it can also be constructive feedback. So I think that that's been now a bit more regularly used by more people, more departments. And that really helps because it's also documented, which is one thing that is very important. So any changes in the organization, these things are not lost, right? So if your manager change and then another one takes over, they have the history of all the feedback that you've received, all the progress that you may have made. We have also a self-reflection questionnaire to really help people take the time to think about their achievements, to think about the areas that they want to grow, so that this is kind of like slowly becoming more and more part of their routine. And there's no way. This takes time and this takes effort. So there's no escape. But I think what also another thing that you really mentioned, like people are scared of feedback, right? And they want to avoid. One thing that we did this year, we trained the whole organization, both like we had a specific training for people leaders and then a slightly different one for individual contributors, where we touched the topic on receiving feedback, which is another skill. And what we found out as well from focus groups and from research within the organization is that the way people receive feedback or tend to receive feedback, sometimes in a very defensive way, is what prevents others to keep giving others feedback, right? So then it is something that we tend to think a lot about, or to train people a lot on the skills of giving feedback, but we rarely think about how do I usually receive feedback, and how do I actually, like, what is my immediate reaction when I get feedback? Does that hinder others from giving me even more feedback?
As soon as you were saying that, I felt my body tensing up, and I felt instantly, like, I don't want feedback, right? So
I know.
definitely a lot of us, I mean, for me, I feel myself like instantly, like I'm getting in trouble, right? And so how to receive feedback and how to actually take it without going into this like freeze sort of response, right? And that's why
which is normal.
Totally. And that's why we need training on this, and because you've been through, this isn't a sales pitch to everybody on the call at all, but we truly believe in upskilling people so that they don't be like me and freeze up and like, I don't want to get feedback, right? In a role. So how did you find, like, I know, cause you have really leveled up in your role with Zenjob. And I know you went through our high performance manager program. Like, how did that help you with as already a very emotionally intelligent person who's very aware? But how else did it help you like level up? Like I know because when you're going to these leadership positions, there's things like OKRs and KPIs and like metric stuff, which are like for a lot of new leaders as well too.
Yeah.
So did that help you at all with your new role?
hmm Yeah. So I really loved the format of the program, which was it consisted in something that I also, as a learning experience designer, I also believe in the fact that like shorter sessions that you can embed in someone's daily routine are much more effective because then people really they can't just say, oh, I don't have time for this. You can make time for them, right? And then they were also spread throughout some weeks with like some pre-reading or videos, and then a live session where we did have some content, but we also had breakout sessions to exchange with peers. Plus, my favorite part, I guess, was the peer circles, which was once a week we would meet and then also have breakout sessions with like 3 or 4 other people that are in the same area that we work, right? So I was paired up with other people that work in people teams, and that was so insightful. This is one thing that I also implemented here. I copied a little bit the format too, because it's also the feedback from our leaders. That's usually the favorite part of any trainings, which is like, how can we ensure that we make time and make space for them to gather and have these exchanges so that they understand that a lot of people go through very similar challenges, and then they can share best practices. So one, they don't feel alone, and two, they might get so many different ways of doing things that they haven't thought just by this social learning element. And I really loved it.
Yeah, the social learning and the peer circles is something that we do so well here at Hello Circle.
Mhm.
It's something, I mean, Darius, our founder at BIA, has been doing for years and years and years. And I've been through cohorts myself too, and there are still people in my old cohorts and peer circles I've done that I still talk to, and we're still people that I can still count on, really. So this was really incredible, and we've covered so much. And like I said, there are so many topics I could just keep you here and going on for long, but I appreciate that everyone's probably getting ready to get away from the screen. So I want to open the floor to questions. And um, I see there's still a lot of people on, which is really great. So nobody's really actually dropped off, which is incredible. So I would love to take some questions and so please hit me, everybody, if you can still hear me. The chat is open. Okay, I actually have a question personally.
Oh, okay.
Something that really I want to know, because I know how busy an L&D and people ops teams are. And so like how do you set yourself up for like, okay, some more questions are really coming in. But how do you set yourself up for the day? Like, what is your morning routine?
Mhm.
We're going to start with a light
Good
question.
question.
We're doing an icebreaker.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, so I think that people who work with me or around me, around my team area, know that I'm a morning person. So I'm already quite energized in the morning. So I am this annoying person that arrives in the office and says, "Good morning," when everybody's like, "Oh, come on, I still haven't had my coffee." But it helps me a lot if I do some exercise, any sort of exercise. If I go for a run, if I go for a workout, if I do some yoga, that's usually the first thing that I do. And then I have my breakfast and then I'm ready for anything. So that helps. Moving the body helps my mind stay sane.
I think we can all agree with that. And even at Hello Circle, we do touch on the importance of that. That's why this question was actually asked. So it is part of your own leadership, your own
Yeah.
development, and your own self-care and self-awareness. So let's get into a different kind of question. So we have one here.
So many questions.
Yeah, I know. Can you see them all too? Yeah,
Okay.
this is a really active group. So see, we make it like an online
Love
chat.
it.
So thank you, everyone.
Yeah. That's lovely.
So we'll start with the first one. How does Zenjob design personalized learning pathways, and what frameworks or methods do you use to adapt these changing business needs and market trends?
Yeah. That's a very interesting. Ooh, I love that. The question came like on the screen. I love it. Yes. So we base our decisions on what to how what topics or how to support our individuals or our teams and any initiatives that we take as a PNC team on data. So some of our basic like people KPIs, but also a lot on employee feedback and data from the performance cycle. So that's also when performance management processes, when you have something established, you put it in place, you see it pays off because then you create a history of like feedback and performance progression that you can utilize to define a better, like more relevant learning paths. And I think that to be very honest, we are a very small team, so I'm a bit of a team of one. So that's not something like we create all the learning paths for each individual, but we also kind of have an L&D budget in place where people can then define, but together with their managers, they create a development plan. So we do work a lot on helping managers to support how to kind of like align what types of initiatives will cover or will make the person like cover these learning gaps that they have. And in terms of frameworks, as you mentioned, we have a competency framework, as I had mentioned before. So this is something that we have very consistent throughout the organization. Like we have a competency framework for individual contributors and a different one for people leaders because it's a different skill set. With that, all the questionnaires on feedback, on 360 feedback and the performance evaluations reflect those so that you can also track from one cycle to the other how was the progress within those and what is the difference between each level of seniority as well. So what is needed for me to get a promotion perhaps in a cycle or two, or how much time I need. And we try our best, and I think we improve every year, let's say, in having a continuous feedback loop. I think that's one of the most important parts for development.
Yeah, continuous feedback.
Yes.
How can organizations ensure that L&D programs are inclusive, catering to diverse leadership styles and experiences?
That is a great question. So, great. I was trying to reread.
Like, where did the question go? Yeah.
I would say that one way to ensure that any learning initiative, whether it's a training or it's a program, it could also be there are many different ways to learn, and I like to emphasize that it's I told Nicole once, it's like people don't necessarily need to take a day off and attend training to say that they're actually learning and developing. The learning part happens anywhere, anytime. It happens all the time. Actually, it's just about reflecting on what changed, right? So it could be a mentoring program or a peer coaching program, etc. I think that it's very important that whoever is like creating those programs or managing those programs ensure that they don't do it alone. So who is the audience? So who is this for? And then perhaps have focus groups with really diverse people, like different people from different departments, people from different demographics, so that then you get different inputs, you understand their different needs, and also ensure that this diversity is kind of covered within the program. I hope that is one way that you should always do that. Yes.
I love that. And especially you don't have to take a day or two or a week off to go do all this training, right? It's like really about these, it's in the day to day. And even at Hello, you have these weekly coming in, and it's not like you're chained to your desk all day at a computer learning. Traditions.
And I just wanted to add that the peer learning, the social learning aspect is so important. People don't understand, they underestimate the power of learning from others and also trying to teach someone else what they already know, because really you get so much insight from colleagues. And I think that one way to, the question also added like catering diverse leadership styles and experiences. I think one way would be also to sometimes just get different leaders from the organization together and maybe have a main topic and design a different format for them to exchange on that, to exchange challenges, best practices, so that they get to know how they work and also to connect, right? The connection part on a slightly more personal aspect make everything a lot easier. Like you understand, even if you never had contact with that person in the organization, you're like, this is, at the end of the day, we're just human beings that have challenges and we're all trying to overcome them in different ways. So I think that helps.
Absolutely. And it's really those soft skills like the empathy and all of that, and just being able to connect with another human, human to human. So yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. Look at these. Look at the questions coming in, Patricia. I hope we have
Oh
time
my
for them.
God. Let's
Yeah.
see.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. So I'm curious what you specifically would do or did in a previous job to build a feedback culture within a growing company.
Yeah. Um, sometimes it's a lot of small things. Culture already exists per se, right? So I think that feedback is something that can exist in different formats. And sometimes you may already have some teams that are already doing some sorts of rituals that are very good at exchanging feedback. Let's say usually tech teams, they are very good at that already because they work in sprints and they always usually do a retro, right? Which is essentially looking back and getting feedback and then iterating, learning from their achievements and from their mistakes. So you might want to gauge these teams or these types of rituals and see if you can get someone or a few people to be ambassadors and to replicate this in other teams in the organization and create these little formats and rituals across the whole company. Another thing is to really make use of the tools that you already have in place. So as I said, you are like L&D teams never have enough budget, I must say. Maybe you agree with me. You suffer the same. So sometimes we have to find creative ways to just make use of the tools that people are already using, so that it's also not something that, oh, they have to open something completely separate that they never do, because that's just they're not gonna do it. So sometimes also implementing something directly on Slack, for instance, is easier to make them get the habit. It's also about the habit, right? It's about practicing it. So maybe have a channel where people shout out others in the organization, right? Praise can always be in public. Constructive feedback, please, on a one-on-one. But maybe setting reminders on a team channel. Hey, what was one thing that you achieved this week, and what was one thing that you learned? And then everybody shares something from themselves or something like that. So these are small things that you can create to kind of like get the traction that you need to then maybe put a more robust process in place, and people then start like getting the buy-in from the beginning. And other formats like engagement surveys, like asking people what they're missing, what they need, and how it would be easier for them to do that usually helps, because as I said, the co-creation element is a very good way to get people in.
Yeah, and I love that with the prompts as well, because you never just want to go in cold with feedback. Like, just provide feedback. It's more like I like the setting up the prompts. How do you actually
Mhm.
show what you're doing is making a difference?
That's hard. This is a question in L&D that is always asked, and we don't have a straightforward answer, because also sometimes some learning initiatives, their impact is very hard to measure, right? Because it's like sometimes it's one training is not going to solve the issue. It's more like it initiates the behavior change that needs to trigger those new behaviors, those new things that need to be put in place so that a metric in the organization will be changed. So some things that we do are, whenever we have, let's say, a training, of course, we have a survey, but it's just to get the immediate understanding and sense, sentiment of the group, but also as a follow-up, perhaps like a month later, sending a similar survey to those participants asking, okay, so how did you apply those skills from the training? And then getting that, giving them time to really put the learning into practice and see how different individuals are, maybe something resonated more with them, or maybe one particular area of development was more important for them, and how they used the knowledge and the skills that the training touched in their routine. And of course, we have, for example, we have an engagement survey where there are some dimensions where we touch topics around learning and development, how people feel in regards to their own personal professional growth. A lot of what we do in terms of leadership development is also measured both through our engagement survey scores, but also performance management. That's one thing, right? We can see how managers are being evaluated in the different competencies. And we have the tool of upward feedback. So the individual team members give feedback about their managers, and they also give feedback on the specific competencies that we have. Again, we already have these embedded in our processes, so it's a lot easier than to track and to measure the differences from, let's say, from a period of 6 months or a period of a year, and you can track progress. So that these are some of the things. And then I think that whatever learning initiative that you're doing, what is the end result that you want? What is the actual KPI that you want to change, right? So is it the number of calls that sales development representatives need to do on a day? So you're training them to achieve that. And that's the KPI that's going to help measure the success of your training course.
In people, ops, and L&D, there's always going to be resistance from senior leaders. So how do you get buy-in, and how do you cope with that resistance?
I don't. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, sometimes it's hard. I think that one advantage that I must say that we have is in general, our C-level team does care a lot about our people topics. So that's a lot easier. I think that in order to make senior leadership to like believe you or even listen to you, you have to also kind of try to speak their language. So sometimes if you want to implement a tool or you want to implement a process, you need to think from their perspective, what do they need to do to help you make a decision or to decide or even to agree with you, right? Sometimes you have to put it in more business language. So what is the return on impact? What will this change for their teams or for the KPIs that they are responsible for? Or how is this going to help us save money and become more effective? So I think it's really about knowing your audience, understanding what language you need to speak with them. So what kind of arguments will be actually relevant for them, and try to adjust your let's say your proposal accordingly. And how to cope with resistance. Sometimes I also have to simply disagree and commit. Sometimes I also have to understand, you know what, maybe my idea is not the best idea in the world. So what I do is I try to get context. So what is it that made this person or this leader make this decision, and try to understand their reasoning as well. And perhaps I can say, I see your point. Therefore, I'm going to change part of my proposal to adjust to that, and maybe we can meet halfway. So that's one thing.
I love that, the meeting halfway, and also like compromising a bit too. So, so let's try this one: performance management. How is your performance management framework designed? What is included? Or conversations, or both?
Yeah. So we have a competency framework, which is really a base. So we already have some tools in place. Usually what we do a biannual review. So we always do twice a year. So we track more or less the period of 6 months. Therefore, we evaluate the performance of the individual within those 6 months. And we have some elements. So we don't use 360 feedback exactly for the purpose of evaluation. This is a tool that everybody has access to, and they can trigger anytime. So it doesn't have to be just at the moment of the cycle triggered by HR, but more like throughout those 6 months, you should gather and also share your feedback with your peers and stakeholders. And then by the time when the cycle actually starts, we trigger a self-reflection questionnaire and a manager evaluation, which will have scores. So we use, and again, performance management is a whole science in itself. And I think that many organizations do it differently. And I don't think there is one way to do it right. And I also think that you can't just copy what one organization does, because it might not work for yours. So what we do, we use 2 dimensions to track. So we use a 9-box grid way of rating. So we track competency and contribution. So contribution is really straightforward. It's the achievement of the targets. or other KRs or any initiatives that they work on. And competency is based on our competency framework. And from that, there is a result. We also have a period of calibration. So it's not just based on the one manager evaluation, but we also put managers together from a specific department to gather any other input that might not have shared, and also to make sure that we have a more standardized way of evaluating. Some managers are a little bit more generous than others. Then PNC, so myself and my manager, we do a whole analysis in terms of demographics to understand, perhaps trying to catch potential biases that are on the way. Like, are we treating somebody unfairly just because of like gender or parenthood, etc.? So we do a lot of that. And then we come to a final decision that will be communicated, and there's a conversation between manager and employee. And from there, they should also, there's some action plans that we recommend. And from there, they take on to the next. So in a nutshell, of course, happy to go further in detail on offline, of course, or you can also always reach out on LinkedIn. We can connect on that.
I feel like I'm in a master class with you right now. It's like I'm like learning about all these different systems that happen within an organization. Really, I'm going to wrap up the last two questions really quickly, and maybe we can answer that in 30 seconds. Do you have a mentorship? Do you have any mentorship initiatives or any program?
Yes, we do have an internal mentoring program, which at the moment is what I say is my neglected child, because it's one initiative that I'm not working super actively at the moment, but we're planning to revamp it as soon as I get a bit more support. It is basically, you can start very simple, and I do think that is super beneficial. Whoever has been part of this initiative always appreciates. So essentially, there are companies or there are tools out there that help doing the matching, but I think you can also, depending on the size of your organization, you can definitely do it manually. So basically, we have a Google form for a mentee to apply to say, developing these skills, this is the kind of support I need. We have a mentor for people to say, I want to become a mentor, and these are the skills that I think I can help with. And then we do the matching. And even if I don't have a mentor, like in my pool of mentors, I might already know from a team or from my own knowledge or from performance management results, or even I can reach out to some leaders. Hey, I need someone that is really good at public speaking. Who would you recommend, for example, right? So then I can do the matchmaking, and then I pair them up and I give them some guidance. So what is mentoring about? I give them some templates if they want to follow, but essentially this is like a self-organized relationship, right? And if it doesn't match, if the first meeting that they have, maybe they don't match, I say it's absolutely fine, and I find another way. But I recommend.
Mm-hmm. Patricia, I just want to thank you for all your time and all the wisdom that you brought with us today, and to everybody on this call who was so engaged and asked so many great questions. We're going to put in the chat. We would love to stay connected with you all, and we want to just keep these webinars going and keep the knowledge sharing going, and really create great leaders and really grow organizations. So we're always open to maybe ideas you have or other suggestions you have for any kind of live streams or talks or things like that. And Anastasia, who is in the chat right now, has set up all these great links for you to join us for more. We have breakfast. We'll have another webinar next month, and we'll also have a masterclass. We're adding a lot of know-how and a lot of knowledge and educational based pieces on LinkedIn. And you can also connect with Patricia on LinkedIn.
Yay. So thank you so much, everyone, for staying here, for all the questions. That was very insightful. Thank you, Nicole, for being such a great host.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Hello. Thank you to Darius, our founder, and to Anastasia. And we look forward to seeing you all online and hopefully here again.